Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. What night is it tonight? It is Monday night, and it is time for Couch Conversations with the Doctors. So, on tonight, we're going to have a conversation about rheumatology. So, Joe is going to lead us off in that conversation, and I'm going to leave it up to Joe and Doug to educate you guys on rheumatology. Remember to get your questions in. Of course, you can send them as always the way that you usually do, and we're right here for you. Go right ahead, Joe.
Yeah, well, I want to welcome everybody. Thank them for joining. It's always a pleasure to be here. Look forward to seeing the congressman when he can join. But and I'm not a doctor, but I know a lot about health and more so public health. But Doug knows about rheumatology. People have probably heard the word, but they don't know what it is. And in medicine, we have a lot of subspecialties. And one of those subspecialties is rheumatology. It's a area of internal medicine. It focuses on diagnosis and in treating autoimmune diseases, musculoskeletal pain disorders. And if you're like me, you probably have some bad knees, and he can talk about that. And there's also this issue of osteoporosis. So I'm going to stop there, give Doug the opportunity to maybe chime in. I see Dr. Mason has joined us.
Well, Joseph, I really
Are you
appreciate
there,
you. Are you with us, Dr. Mason?
Well, he's on camera, but he's not.
Yeah, I think I
So
might
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Doug.
So in rheumatology, we study things that affect the joints, the muscles, the tissues that connect the muscles to the joints, and the diseases whose symptoms usually express themselves as similar as problem with the joints. We can divide them into two different kinds. One is a natural thing that happens as we get older. The second one are the diseases. And we don't necessarily know what causes all these diseases. It's a combination of factors of your genes and what other illnesses you get exposed to that trigger these events that cause the body to start reacting to your normal tissue as if it's a foreign invader. We call those autoimmune diseases. All of us will experience the condition called osteoarthritis, which is the aging of the joints. When we evolved from the apes 2 billion years ago, those joints were designed to last 30 to 35 years. So it is a natural phenomenon as we get into our 40s, 50s, and 60s. And all of a sudden, things that used to turn one direction or the other don't turn as far as they used to. You'll hear some creaking and some snapping. And you'll notice that things don't kind of move open and close, move straight forward or backward as easily as they normally would. That's a condition that we would probably describe as osteoarthritis. And if we took an x-ray, we could see that the space between the bones has become narrower and narrower and narrower. And that's because the surface between the bones, the cartilage, has begun to wear down. Certain people are more likely to get it than others. There is a genetic predisposition, and it's also related to your occupations and how you use it. For instance, electricians who are pulling wires all the time are going to have it in their shoulders. And I've seen golfers get it in their elbows, and professional weightlifters will wear out their hips pushing on the presses. So anytime that you are using those joints more frequently than the person next to you, you may be advancing the wear and tear changes on the surface of the joints. Also, weight also contributes a factor. For every 10 pounds that you're overweight, that's 30 extra pounds on your knees and 90 extra pounds on your ankles. And that means that they have to work that much harder as you go up and down the stairs, in and out of the car, walking down the street. So I'm going to stop there and see if people have questions before going much further.
Well, I want to welcome Congressman Davis. It's this show, but he just joined, so it's good to see Congressman Davis in the house. And we're talking about rheumatology. Doug just gave a definition. Know that those of us that are of a certain age have experienced much of which he has talked about in terms of pain in the joints and lack of ability to move. So it's something that we take for granted when we're younger. And it's something that probably over time will happen regardless of what you do. But there are some things that you can do to lessen the likelihood. Well, I won't say the likelihood, the severity of rheumatology, or what is rheumatoid arthritis? I know that's the one word that comes to mind, rheumatoid arthritis,
Yeah.
which is a specific form of arthritis, and maybe we talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
But there is going to be pain in the joints, and I know as I've gotten older, I've got pain in my hips. I had to have two knees replaced. That was based upon wear and tear, and more importantly, pain. So I've
Mhm.
had them replaced. I'm going to stop there and maybe let Congressman Davis start and open us up, and we'll go back to this discussion about rheumatology.
Well, the only thing about it, Joe, is that I was going to ask you, just talking about it, you ain't feeling it, and you may be talking about it, but I'm feeling it. I don't know if I'm muted or not.
I feel it too. That's what I'm saying.
I feel it every day. Let me tell you, if it's not one joint, it's another joint. It's a place. But as I got on, I heard Dr. Graham talking about, weight
Dear, what's up?
being a factor in some instance. And I was just listening earlier today at a health report suggesting that maybe about half of the African American population suffer from obesity, that a large portion of Black people are overweight one way or another. I'm talking about a large number.
Yeah.
And I guess any question that I would have would be, does obesity add to the likelihood that one is going to experience arthritis?
So I would say,
I would say yes. Doug would
yeah,
say the same thing.
yeah, I would agree with Joseph. And unfortunately, you're more likely to get osteoarthritis in your lower back, your hips, and your knees because the extra weight of work that your body has to have to move that extra weight. So it is a real contributing factor. Plus, you're probably not exercising as much, and you need to keep those muscles strong to keep everything moving in the right order. There's kind of a pattern of movement that your knees and ankles move in and requires all the muscles to be equally strong. That may not happen as you gain more and more weight. So you lose conditioning and fitness as well. It's kind of double.
If that be the case,
Mhm.
then how do we convince African Americans to be more engaged in physical activity? And I understand that some of the physical activity does not have to be all that strenuous,
Mhm.
that it doesn't have to be jumping up and down.
Mhm.
It does not have to be hard-nosed stretching. That if it is done with regularity, and if one kind of approaches it by, kind of getting into it, although not so overtly, some of us, we become sedentary and thinking that, is there a way to really move the needle on this?
Yeah,
And
I would go ahead. I'll wait for you to finish,
no,
Danny.
that's it. That was my question.
Well, I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to let Doug because he's the expert. But I do want to point out there was a program that the American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, and the American Diabetes Association put together maybe about 15 or 20 years ago. it was called Everyday Choices. And it talked about the things people could do to prevent what we would call the early onset of disease. Those are simple things. One thing is just moving. We talk about physical activity, but physical activity, if you break it down to as small as possible, is just moving and possibly lifting, moving and lifting. Some people jog for exercise. Some people walk for exercise. That gets your heart rate up, gets your heart beating a little bit faster. And if you do that, you know, that'll help. Some people lift weights, and some people do exercises where you can lift your own body weight, like push-ups. You can do push-ups. So there are things people could do every single day to lessen the likelihood that the conditions that Doug talked about would occur. It won't prevent, lessen the likelihood that they would occur. But even if they did occur, they may not be as challenging as people find them to be. You know, I was saying earlier that you know, I was very active. I'm still very active. I try to work out every day. I have a bike in the house. I go for bike rides. I go for walks. I lift weights 3 times a week. I'm very careful about I'm very conscious of what I eat. But I've told people that I can't tell people what they should do and not practice it myself. So I've incorporated all those things into my daily life. So for me, getting up in the morning and not moving to some degree, having some degree of physical activity is abnormal. But I've done it to the point where that's what I do. Some people get up immediately and they think about taking a shower and getting dressed. I think about carving out enough time to maybe get on my bike for a few minutes, maybe do some sit-ups or some other thing. Maybe if I have time, lift weights, then shower, then get dressed, and if I got time, eat a little something. But we can improve our health just by doing simple things and including some level of movement and activity in our daily lives. But most people say they don't have time, and I would argue it's not that you don't have time, you have failed to make time to do it.
Yeah. I think that's right, Joseph. The other thing I think about is, you know, part of this is leadership. You know, who's in your community, who's leading by example, both ways, both good and bad. And so you have to deal with both sides of that. And the other thing is, I'm kind of a big fan of group activities. You know, if you are doing this with your friends or you're doing this with other people, you know, you are interacting, you're moving, but you also have people kind of checking you out, making sure that you're doing enough rather than, you know, taking a day off. So I think that it's real hard to do that regularly, day in and day out, unless you're a very, very organized and disciplined person. But there may be benefits to you doing this as a group with other people, like walking groups. You know, for instance, in the winter, going to some of these indoor malls and walking that mall for a period of time so you get your steps in. But another problem is, what are the other things that are available in your environment? If you live where there's a food desert, that makes the problem twice as hard. You know, if you live in an environment where you don't have access to places where you can exercise freely without worrying, that's a problem too. So we can talk about this, but we really have to understand what's the setting that's occurring and what are the possibilities.
Well, you know, I think that learning to practice what you preach, and I must declare, Joe, that you're kind of a role model of mine in terms of an individual who seemed to have reached the point or appeared to actually do what you say. And I really appreciated your comment earlier in terms of saying, if you were going to be a health educator, if you were going to be that, you were going to practice what that meant so that you weren't just saying, here's what ought to happen, that you're demonstrating that you can really do this if you put yourself to it and decide. I try to do some of that, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm saying, and one really would have to concentrate and be very serious about it in order to do it. And so I commend you, to be very honest about it,
Well, thank you.
for leading. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say you can't lead where you don't go, and you can't teach what you don't know. And so trying to listen to somebody say what ought to be done, but they ain't doing it. Say it's kind of like my daddy used to say the same thing, except he'd never been to school and stuff. He would always say, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. And we didn't know what he was talking about. He'd say, I'd rather that you walk with me than merely point the way. So I think you're doing it. You're my role model as a health educator, health practitioner.
Well, thank you very much, Congressman. I never intended to be a role model, but two things, and I did say that since I chose a career in healthcare and public health, I thought that I had to at least look like I was healthy when I was talking to people, and I could actually tell people that the things that I'm telling them, I'm doing to myself moving forward. So that wasn't that hard, and Doug used the operative word. It takes discipline. I think that's what you said, Doug.
Discipline, yeah.
But discipline is merely self-control. That's what discipline is.
Well, but I think Joe goes beyond that, because exercise actually has very real benefits besides weight control. It's good for your heart. It's actually good for your emotions. You will sleep better at night. So I always time when I think discipline, I kind of think like the school teacher whacking you over the wrist because you threw a spitball, but this is different than this. This is helping you achieve a goal of fitness and well-being. So there are rewards to this. It's not just all, I can't do something that I prefer to do, but it's how to get to a better place in a way that will, that doesn't require a lot of investment of money or other things to get to that particular place. Am I making myself clear, Joseph? Because I think discipline can be two different things.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have, yeah.
I'm not arguing with you. It's when, where, and how you employ the discipline. And again, I get back to self-control, because we can modulate ourselves. We can make the decision that allow us to lead a healthy lifestyle. What I've told people, if you do something enough, it becomes habitual. I mean, I wasn't always like this. I would venture to guess that, like me, most young people really don't care much about what they eat. They eat what they like and eat as much as they want to. Some will get fat, some won't. Some will continue. Once they become overweight, they'll continue to eat, and they won't understand. And what they don't seem to understand, the relationship between the amount of food they consume and the weight that they gain. They don't perceive the direct relationship to it. For me, I realized at an early age that the amount of food that I ate, the quality of food I ate, had something to do with my overall health and well-being. And I made a decision that I probably need to change if I want to be the person that I envision myself to be. So this has been a journey of a lifetime. And I'm not saying that it's easy, but again, I'll go back and say that if you have a bad habit, you can turn a bad habit into a good habit. Yeah. I used, like a lot of people, I started smoking when I was like 16 years old because I thought it was cool. By the time I was 20, I thought I was crazy. I spent a lot of money. I was buying cigarettes. I like to smoke. I like to blow out smoke rings because it looked cool to smoke. And when I had a cigarette in my hand, it looked cool. And then I realized, and I started thinking about it in terms of health and the warning labels that were put on cigarettes to let you know that they're detrimental to your health. It became clear that I could continue this and I could still enjoy myself, but I was putting myself at risk. And so it's not that the information isn't out there and that there are not warning labels on cigarettes, but once you get addicted to cigarettes and really more nicotine, I've heard it said, working in public health and healthcare, that nicotine is more addictive than cocaine. And there's no purpose for nicotine to be in cigarettes other than it's a flavoring, but it also is addicting. And that's why there's nicotine in cigarettes. If you got a cigarette that was just purely tobacco, you may choke. It may modify or mollify some of that, but it is really what causes the addiction to go to a higher level. So that's what people that produce cigarettes know.
Plus, somebody told me yesterday that cigarettes cost about $20 a pack.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah, I've been at the grocery store. I've seen them buy it at that price. I mean, I can remember they were a lot cheaper than that. I'm not sure how people can afford that now. I mean, that's
I can't either.
Yeah.
$20 a pack?
But I want to get back to something that Joseph said. Nicotine's addictive. They also know that the taste of salt and sugar are addictive too. And so this is where I think Joseph's right on about discipline, is that you can look at those labels and you can make the decision. Do you want low salt or high salt? Understand that high salt is hard on the kidneys and hard on the heart. And you can make that decision between low sugar and lots of added sugar and understand that sugar is bad calories for you, more inflammation, more weight gain, and more problems later on. So, yeah, there is a role for discipline in terms of reading the labels and understanding what you're putting in yourself and what the consequences might be, like Joseph did with nicotine.
Well, let me ask about that salt and sugar stuff. My taste buds, in terms of what I find to my liking, that just does not seem to change. And I'm saying the food that I really like the most is the same stuff that my mother used to cook. Yesterday was Mother's Day. I'm saying I'd much rather have some turnip greens than some caviar. I'm saying turnip greens and cornbread just taste better to me than caviar or some other dish. So how does one kind of regulate these taste bud things and what? Now, I must admit that a good breakfast for me used to be salt pork, fried hard, and biscuit and some rice or grits, either one, and I could just about eat myself to death with that. How do I break away from the desire to have that?
So Joseph, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I was waiting to see if you wanted to say something, not and rather not jump in. Yeah, I think there are ways to do it because the operative word, that's what you like, that's what your habit is. If it's a habit, you can change your habits. That's all. You can control the decisions you make,
Mhm.
and 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 the advertisements that we see about a lot of foods make it even more enticing, particularly fast foods, because they're telling you how cheap it's going to be. You don't have to cook it. You can come
Mhm.
by here and you can buy as much as you want. You can eat as much as you want, and we'll make it cheaper for you if you want to eat more. We'll give you more and lower the price so you get more without paying that much more. And so that's how food is advertised to a lot of us. And again, Doug talked about the fact that in many communities, there's not the same degree of access to healthy foods as there are fast foods and foods that may not be the best for you. Also, there's the fact that if you don't prepare the food, you don't know how it's prepared, you don't even know what they put into the food. And so you're eating a lot of things that may taste good, they may not be good for you, but you don't even know how they were prepared, what may have happened. No, you don't even know somebody may have been mad that day and spit into the food while they were cooking the food. So there are some risks associated with that. But what you do control is the decisions you make. You can make bad decisions and you can make good decisions. What we're advocating for is you take a step back, you think about these things, and maybe you make a different decision. If you have a bad habit, you can change it to a good habit. People seem to think that once they live a certain way, um, there's no way they can change. But certain experiences will change you and you will change your way. Um, for example, now I use this probably not the best example. If if you commit a crime and you go to jail for the crime and you knew you committed the crime and you knew you were guilty and you wanted to get out of jail, and even if you were in jail only for a few days or a few seconds, you want to get out of jail. Once you get out of jail, you don't have to do the same things all over again and repeat the same thing because you're going to go back to jail if you do the same thing. Some people never have one encounter with the law, some people have multiple encounters. But I do know that people are capable of change. And what you may be eating today, over time, you could change it, but it starts somewhere. It starts with you making a decision, one that I'm going to change, and taking your time. And you may fail, but if you fall down, you can get up and you can try again. So I'm encouraging people just to try to do it. You don't have to do it. And even if you're moderately successful, you'll be better off in the long run than if you hadn't made any change whatsoever.
I mean, Joseph, I really like that. I also might want to say sometimes it's hard making the change all at once,
Right.
like giving up everything. And so maybe you want to break it down into steps and say, maybe I'll have half as much as I used to. I also recommend trying new foods and new places if you can, because sometimes you might get introduced to something that you enjoy. It may not be the same as what you started with, but it gives you an opportunity to still enjoy what you're doing, enjoy food. It gives you an alternative. So you can make those choices and understand here's a choice that might be better for me than the last choice. So you can work your way to that goal.
Yeah. But it starts with the individual.
Yeah, it starts
You
with the
got to make
individual.
a decision and you got to make a change. And one of the things that I hear that's implied in what we're saying, you don't have to make a big change all at once.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where people go wrong. They try to say, well, I'm going to stop this, and you want to stop in a day. You can't stop some things you've been doing most of your life in a day. Give yourself at least time and opportunity. I know and this is a Christian thing, that I know I have many friends who give up vices for Lent. Sometimes they'll say, I'm not going to smoke for Lent. I'm going to give up cigarettes. And they
Mhm.
do. They do a success. I have friends say, I'm not going to drink till Lent is over. And they do. And they're successful. But as soon as Lent is over, that's when everything goes out the window. So now, whatever I said I wasn't going to do, and I was successful at doing it, I don't have to do it anymore. And some people will bend, some people go back slowly. But again, you have more power inside of you than perhaps you imagine. And so, what I think we're saying is instead of saying to yourself, I can't do this, say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be successful. Take small steps. And that's what they recommend. Small steps over time can make a big difference if you take small steps.
So I see in the chat, people are talking about Pepsi and Coca-Cola. And I just want to add that those formulas have been researched very, very carefully. They know what they're doing. They know that they want to encourage you to continue to go back and buy that 6-pack, that 12-pack, that 24-pack. It's designed for that. And it's the same with all of those chips you see at the grocery store when you checked out. They do decades of research to know what's going to appeal to you and what's going to make you buy that next bag. So the question I ask is, who's benefiting by this Coca-Cola? Who's benefiting by this chip? It's not the person who's eating it. It's the person who's making it.
Well, I try and take the position that one may not be able to control what goes on around them, but they should be able to control how they respond and react to it. And so to suggest that no matter how powerful external influences are, the ultimate though is really self. That self is the ultimate, and that anything other than that is they made me do it. They're the reason.
Well, no, but Congressman, that's why I'm talking about this. So that people know and understand that that's the game that's being played. And they can choose not to play the game. They can decide that, well, somebody else can drink this. It's not good for me. Somebody else can buy these chips. They're not good for me. I may be better off or happier doing something else. But to understand, it is a very, very carefully laid trap. You just don't have to step in it. Or you can work your way out.
And there's a lot of marketing foods to people. Yeah. It's a big business. It's interesting.
What happens? I'm saying, of course, the atmosphere, the environment, the air, so pollution, you may not be able to do a lot of individual stuff in relationship to that. And so there are pollutants in the air. And of course it takes multiple efforts to do something in relationship to it. But beyond that, there's just a lot of stuff that individuals can do and can, make the difference. And of course, having good practitioners, I went to see my primary care physician on Saturday, and we were both gloating a little bit in terms of what some of my numbers were. And he says, I'm delighted that you got these kind of numbers. I said, you're not as delighted as I am. Because they scare me to death when I see them in a different direction. And so, yeah, I was pretty pleased when he said that my blood pressure numbers were pretty cool. And that, you know, matter of fact, I could have jumped and shouted when he told me what they were and that my blood sugar stuff was all right too. And I said, right on, Doc. I said, I'm going to follow what you say as much as I can.
Yeah, Congressman Davis, I can tell you this: shouting would be better than you jumping up and down. There's danger in jumping up and down, but a good shout wouldn't hurt you that much. If you jump up and down, there might be some other problems, you know. And as we get older, we realize that while we want to jump up and down for joy, it's probably safer that we stay close to the ground, as close to the ground as possible. And so we might shout out loud, but we ain't going to jump up and down like we used to when we were young.
Well, I'm going to take your advice on that.
Yeah, but it comes from experience, and it comes from knowing what will happen if you jump up and down. You know that at this point in your life, if you jump up and down, you're subject to have an injury, and that injury might not be a minor injury. So therefore, it doesn't make sense for you to jump up and down, you know. And so when people become joyful, one of the things they like to do is to jump up and down. But as we get older, we can experience joy, and we can think about jumping up and down, but we won't jump up and down. But we will smile and we will shout, and we'll do it in some other ways. So people can change. I mean, it is possible to change regardless of how long you've had a habit, a bad habit, and you need to change. You are capable of change. So that's not a real issue. You need to figure out, or you need to just take the first step and then stick with it. In time, things will be different.
Well, outstanding. Sister Bonnie is here with us, and she says good evening to everyone. And she also says happy birthday to Dr. Miller. So it was happy birthday to Dr. Miller. Connie Taylor is here, and she says good evening to everyone. I see that my sister Melanie Winston is here, and she says good evening to all. Patricia Porter Rowlands is here, and she says good evening to all just as well. Claiborne Wade is here, and he says DKD is the best congressman. Also, Yolanda Williams is here, and she says good evening to everyone. Everyone over at the Core Center is here, and they're saying good evening just as well. Claiborne Wade also says Pepsi, Coca-Cola is addictive. I don't know. I know some people who may really agree with you on that just as well. I see Jack Orloff is here with us just as well. Claiborne Wade also says that's how I am with Pepsi and Coca-Cola. I tried cold turkey and I thought I was going to die. He said, you are totally correct, Dr. Graham. But you know what, Claiborne Wade, you can do it. Just stick with it. You can do it. You can overcome Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Trust and believe you can. I want to say hey to President Carrie Steele, who is here with us just as well, and she is watching too. Well, go right ahead, Joe.
Well, yeah, they're not really addicted to Coca-Cola or Pepsi or 7-Up. What they're addicted to is sugar. There's the sugar they put into it. See, there's a secret ingredient, there's a secret sauce in anything. They like the taste of the sugar, and the sugar can give you a rush and a high. It's just like smoking a cigarette. So it's not just the Coca-Cola, it's the way the Coca-Cola is prepared. You know, it's just like anything. So we have to understand what is the hook. And once we understand what the hook is, we'll put ourselves in a better position.
You hear me talking on the phone, right? Not on the, because I just shut down the couch.
That was Dr. Mason.
Yeah.
So He came off mute and then he went back on mute. But that's the addictive. The one thing is like if you took nicotine out of cigarettes, they would be less addictive. It'd just be a cool thing to do, but it'd probably be harsher in terms of inhaling the smoke, and it would be more difficult to do. But the nicotine helps cut some of the harshness of the smoke. But it really is the thing that's addicting you to cigarettes. I was told once, and it makes sense psychologically, that the whole ritual of smoking is addictive because it involves deep breathing. So, you know how you do yoga and they talk about doing deep breathing? Cigarette smoking involves deep breathing, inhaling and exhaling. And when I was good at cigarettes, one of the things I used to like to do is to blow smoke rings and watch the smoke billow out of my mouth. And then I would blow a ring and watch the ring go out of my mouth and into the sky and become a puffy cloud. So that experience, along with adding some nicotine, gives you a whole different kind of experience moving forward.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, I am glad that you no longer have the craving to blow those smoke rings and let them billow away. And I know people hate to hear us say this, but that's our time. It is. So I'm going to ask Doug if he will give us his until next Monday.
So what I was thinking of is that we're really talking about a map. We're talking about a map to get from here to there. And it's how you get to your golden years and the best of health. And oftentimes when we're taking a journey, we take a wrong turn. But you can get back on the road again and back to the road to your destination. So I think that's what we're talking about is, you can make that decision so that you get to those golden years in your best possible health. And that means paying attention to smoking, paying attention to the sugary drinks, the salty snacks, and the alcoholic beverages. A little bit's okay. A lot of it's going to be a lot of trouble later on.
Want to thank you, Doug, so much. Want to say hello to Chicago's finest and to one of our engine companies that is here with us just as well. Want to say hey to Renelle Perry. Renelle Perry is here along with the Bright Leadership Institute youth and one of her students, Alan. So they want to say hello just as well. Well, Dr. Mason, can you give us your until next Monday? Dr. Mason, can you hear us and give us your until next Monday? Oh, I think he just popped off. All right. Well, Joe, what's your until next Monday?
Well, I'm going to use a phrase from a poem I had to learn when I pledged a fraternity that Congressman Davis is very familiar with. And that's from the poem Invictus by William Ernest Henley. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And I think that's mine.
Okay. All right. Want to say hey to the guys in the garage. I did not forget you. I see that you reminded me again, and I thank you to our guys who watch faithfully all the time. Well, Congressman, as always, take us home.
Well, let me tell you, these discussions are so profound in terms of the realities of life. And I was thinking of my definition that I use for healthy and being healthy. And I always say that in addition to quality of life and period of life and all these other things, is that one is healthy when they're able to fulfill their social role obligations. And it seems to me that there are individuals in our country trying to prevent us from fulfilling our social role obligations. because they're trying to say to us that your decision to vote does not matter. Therefore, we are trying to put you in situations where you will believe that they do not matter as much. And so when we experience all of the gerrymandering that is taking place and being attempted in our country, these elements are saying we want to put you in a position where you believe that your participation will not count. Therefore, there's no point to doing it. And what I'm really saying is that if you're on the fringes and your population group is divided, like, say, the division of blacks in Memphis, Tennessee, where we take a big black population and spread them out into 4 or 5 congressional districts where they won't have as much impact as the outcome. It sort of reminds me of something I heard a fellow say uh, way back, long time ago, relative to 2 schools in a little town, and they were building another school. And he said, as soon as the kids learned how to play Yankee Doodle, they decided to put Yankee on one side and Doodle on the other, so that they couldn't be as influential. And so I want to be as healthy as I can be. I want to fulfill my social role obligations. I want to be able to fight back all of those individuals who are trying to make America less healthy than America could potentially be. Because if the individuals can't experience social role obligations freely and as desirable as they want it to be, then their health is being impeded. And so I would hope that we take from this discussion not only the notion of physical well being, but also the notion of social role obligation fulfillment. That I want to feel good about my country, 'tis of thee. And while I want to experience physical health, mental health, I also want to experience social health, powerful health. So I must be engaged and involved. Thank all of you for listening. Thank all of you for participating. Thank all of you for making Monday evenings what Monday evenings continue to be. So have a good evening. Thank you so much. And let's make sure that we can fulfill those social role obligations to the hilt so that we can be healthy. Thank you. Have a good night. Right on.